Russian troops are ripping the guns off their own tanks. That's real footage, not satire. Turretless T-72s, wrapped in barbed wire and topped with drone jammers, are rolling toward the front like armored buses. It looks absurd. It's also the clearest sign yet of how the war has shifted and how Russia is trying to survive it. At the start, armor was supposed to do the heavy lifting. Russia had the numbers and the models. Fresh T-90Ms up front, mountains of T-72s and T-80S behind them, and warehouses full of Soviet stock kept just in case. Massive columns pushed across the border expecting speed and shock to break Ukraine's defenses. Instead, those columns bogged down, got ambushed, and started burning. Ukrainian troops used modern anti-tank weapons, clever tactics, and eventually cheap drones to turn some of Russia's most expensive equipment into scrap. The scale of loss forced a pivot. Russia raided long-term storage to resurrect Cold War armor that hadn't moved in decades. Crews were trained or retrained at speed. The problem didn't go away. Drones kept coming. $500 FPV drones were chewing through multi-million-dollar vehicles. Russia tried to keep pushing with armor and paid for it. In several sectors, including around Pokrovsk, mechanized assaults were dialed way down and replaced by infantry waves, sometimes in civilian pickups, sometimes on foot. It was brutal, and it wasn't sustainable. Now we're in the next phase. Russia is rebuilding armored groupings near Pokrovsk in Donetsk, clearly preparing for bigger pushes. The difference is what those tanks look like. Alongside classic T-72, T-82, BMPs, and BTRs, analysts are spotting turretless conversions, tank hulls with improvised superstructures, reactive armor tiles bolted on the sides, triangular roofs welded over the top, and radio jammers strapped down like luggage. No main gun, no turret, just mass armor and electronics, an armored delivery van for assault troops. Why do this? Because drones have rewritten the risk equation. A BMP might be fast and purpose-built for infantry, but its armor, often just a few centimeters of steel in key spots, doesn't hold up against modern FPVs carrying shaped charges. A tank hull, even an older T-72, gives you far more protection where it matters. Add layered defenses such as bar cages, razor wire to snag or pre-detonate, and explosive reactive armor to blunt penetrators, and you increase the odds that the vehicle survives long enough to dump a squad near the objective. That's the mission. Survive the drone gauntlet, not duel other tanks. There's also a T-72 specific reason to ditch the turret. The autoloader carousel sits under it with ammunition. It's infamous. A hit to the turret can trigger a catastrophic cook-off. Removing the turret doesn't make the hull invulnerable, but it does remove a known weak point and drops a lot of weight. Lighter hull, lower profile, fewer things to explode. For a platform that's no longer meant to fight tanks head-on, that's an acceptable trade. Does this make the conversion smart? In some ways, yes. Compared to BMPs, a tank-based carrier is tougher, especially with jammers humming and extra plating stacked on. It buys time. It complicates the work of a single drone pilot trying to punch through. It also lets commanders commit infantry under a thicker shell without burning through their dwindling stock of intact gun-armed tanks. But this is not a silver bullet. The drawbacks are obvious the moment you watch one move. Even without a turret, a T-72 hull is still heavy. It's slower to pivot, slower to accelerate, and less forgiving in mud and ruins than a tracked IFV designed for troop work. The ergonomics are bad, and that's putting it politely. Real IFVs have ramps and troop doors for quick dismounts. These conversions often force soldiers to climb over armor that's literally covered in spikes and wire if the vehicle is hit and they need to bail. Every second spent fighting a wall of barbs is a second under fire. There's also the visibility and control problem. A tank without a turret loses optics and weapon stabilization built for gunnery. You can bolt on machine guns, throw a pintle mount on top, slap a camera here or there, but it's still a compromise. These things weren't designed as APCS from the ground up. They're rushed battlefield adaptations. And even with all the add-ons such as jammer masts, spall liners, and reactive tiles, modern drones are adapting too. Pilots change approach angles, warheads get tuned, teams stack drones in waves to overwhelm jammers or attack from different sides. A big armored box is still a big armored box. If it's tracked, it leaves tracks. If it's loud, it's easy to hunt. If it's slow, it's easier to finish. We've seen tank-to APC conversions work when they're properly engineered. Israel's heavy APC built on tank hulls are a prime example. Ukraine has done smaller-scale versions with old Soviet armor. The difference is process and time. Redesigning interiors, integrating doors, adding better seating, wiring proper comms, and building the vehicle for the role. Russia's versions look improvised because they are. They're trying to plug a gap quickly, get infantry closer with fewer losses, while they rebuild actual mechanized punch. So what does this tell us about Russian doctrine today? First, survivability is now the priority over firepower for a chunk of the fleet. That's a major shift from early war breakthrough with massed armor. Second, Russia is clearly husbanding gun tanks for when they think the payoff is worth it. Urban fights near transport hubs, attempts to crack defensive lines, or exploitation once infantry has a foothold. Third, electronic warfare is becoming standard on individual vehicles, not just at the battalion level. You're seeing jammers on everything from trucks to these turretless hulls. If you assume drones are always overhead, every vehicle needs its own umbrella. This sits inside a broader adaptation cycle on both sides. Ukraine iterates drones, longer range, smarter guidance, better cameras. Russia layers armor, cages, spines, and jammers. Ukraine counters with tandem charges, attack angles from below rooflines or rear decks, and coordinated strikes. Russia responds with heavier shells and more electronic warfare. It's fast, ugly, and relentlessly pragmatic. Nobody is waiting for a perfect solution. They're building something good enough by Tuesday and shipping it to the front. Zoom in on Pokrovsk, and you see why this matters. The terrain favors layered defenses and drone ambushes. Any attacker has to move across open ground, dismount, and push into fortified zones under constant observation. If you're Russia and you still want to take ground here, you need to move infantry forward without losing half of them on the approach. A heavy, drone-resistant taxi makes sense even if the taxi looks like a medieval hedgehog welded by a sleep-deprived mechanic. Will it work? It will help sometimes. A few squads will make it closer than they would have in a BMP. A few won't. The real question is whether these adaptations, multiplied across a front, can change outcomes at scale. Can you protect enough vehicles long enough to stack wins? Or do drone swarms and artillery still attrite you faster than you can replace hulls and crews? That's the race. There's a deeper, uncomfortable truth underneath the steel. Every time you turn a main battle tank into a troop carrier, you're admitting you don't have the armor edge you planned on. You're trading the offensive spear for a thicker shield. That's not necessarily bad if it saves lives and enables assaults, but it does signal a shift from "we will crush you with tanks" to "we will try to arrive alive." It's a very different mindset from day one of this war. None of this means Russia has run out of real tanks. It hasn't. You'll still see T-90Ms and T-72B3s with guns rolling alongside these conversions, but the mix is changing. The more drones dominate, the more armies will split vehicles into two camps. Platforms that kill and platforms that absorb punishment to deliver people. Russia, under pressure, is moving faster toward that split than it wanted. Where does it go from here? Expect more heavy conversions, better integrated jammers, and eventually purpose-built heavy APC if industry can keep up. Expect Ukraine to keep targeting soft spots such as rear engine decks, tracks, and roof seams, and to escalate with multi-drone waves and smarter seekers. Expect both sides to use decoys, smoke, and electronic trickery as standard practice. And expect the footage to keep looking strange because the battlefield is forcing strange solutions.